So, something is happening with Marcus Rashford again, and honestly, it might end up being the biggest, messiest, most unpredictable storyline of the entire summer transfer window, and by the end of this video you'll understand exactly why. Marcus Rashford's camp has been busy this week, with people close to him understood to have held fresh conversations with clubs in Italy. AC Milan are the name everyone keeps coming back to, and the noise coming out of Milanello suggests they want him on some kind of loan with a route to a permanent deal further down the line. But here's the question nobody's really answering yet. Is Milan actually his best option, or just the loudest one? Because Rashford is not short of admirers this summer. Whispers out of Germany point to Borussia Dortmund keeping tabs on him, still buzzing off their run to a Champions League final not so long ago. And in Italy, it's not just Milan. Juventus have also been mentioned, a club rebuilding around a young, hungry squad under a fairly inexperienced coach, the kind of project that could either be the perfect stage for a player desperate to reset his career, or a mismatch waiting to happen the moment results stop going their way. Both scenarios feel entirely plausible depending on how the first few months of the season unfold, and that uncertainty is exactly why this rumour refuses to go away. Would Rashford even fit into a dressing room full of players half a decade younger than him, or would the culture shock do more harm than good? That's the part that genuinely intrigues me most, and if you're enjoying this breakdown so far, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because these transfer stories are only going to get wilder from here and you won't want to miss what comes next. A young manager building his identity around energy and pressing isn't always the easiest environment for a big name signing 2 slots straight into, no matter how talented that signing is. Dortmund's model has worked before though, and that history matters here. They took a struggling United winger on loan last year and turned his form completely around, restoring his value and his confidence in the same 12 months. That tells you the Bundesliga can be exactly the kind of pressure valve certain Premier League players need when things have gone stale at home. Could the same trick work twice with a different player wearing black and yellow next season? It's not out of the question, and clubs love repeating a formula once it's proven to work. Milan's pitch is simple, and it's a compelling one. Serie A has quietly become the go-to rehab league for Premier League talent that lost its spark somewhere along the way. Think about the players who arrived there written off, half forgotten by fans back home, and left Italy as some of the most feared attackers on the continent. One of them was even crowned the best player in Africa this year after reviving his entire career in Serie A, going from a squad player bouncing around different leagues to arguably the most feared forward in the entire division within the space of just a couple of seasons. That reputation alone might be enough to tempt Rashford's people into saying yes without much hesitation, because success stories like that travel fast in football circles, and agents pay very close attention to which leagues are currently turning careers around. Milan sit mid-table right now, chasing a return to the Champions League places after a frustrating campaign, and adding someone with Rashford's raw ability could be exactly the jolt they need to climb back up the table. The one snag in all of this: their best attacker already plays in almost the exact position Rashford wants for himself. A player who's been electric in big moments even if his overall output this season has been inconsistent. That sets up a genuinely fascinating battle for a starting shirt, one that could either sharpen Rashford into the player he used to be, or bury him even further on the bench than he already is. So which is it going to be, a reawakening or another false start? Tactically, there's an argument that a front two suits Rashford far better than the wide role he was so often forced into under previous United managers. Give him a license to drift centrally, to play off a strike partner instead of hugging the touchline, and suddenly you're looking at the version of Rashford who once carried United's attack almost single-handedly for a season. Less width, less isolation, more freedom to operate through the middle where he actually does his best work. Could a simple shift in shape unlock everything that's gone missing over the last couple of years? Some pundits are already comparing his potential reinvention to a player who spent years bouncing between clubs before suddenly becoming one of the most dangerous forwards on the planet. If that story can happen once, why not twice? Some in the punditry world are already calling that player the best in the world right now, which is a bold claim, but not one you can dismiss outright given how devastating he's been in the biggest games. The pressure valve theory keeps coming up again and again in every conversation about where Rashford goes next, and it's not hard to see why. At Old Trafford, every touch gets dissected, every miss becomes a headline, every good game gets forgotten within a week, and that kind of scrutiny can wear down even the most confident players over time. Somewhere with lower expectations and a fresh crowd, somewhere he can just play football without a camera zooming in on every mistake might be exactly what rebuilds his confidence from the ground up. Coaches who favour a front to setup have historically gotten the best out of him too, going all the way back to a stretch a few seasons ago when he was United's most reliable source of goals from a central striking role. That's not a small detail, it's arguably the single biggest clue in this entire situation. But will a move actually materialise before the window slams shut, or is this going to be one of those transfers that rumbles on for months without resolution, dragged out deadline after deadline until nobody even remembers how it started? Realistically, nothing happens overnight here. With Champions League football off the table for his parent club, going back there looks increasingly unlikely, which puts even more weight on how he performs heading into pre-season. If Rashford turns up fit, sharp and firing in front of goal during those early friendlies, he gives his current manager a genuine selection headache, and headaches like that have a habit of changing a manager's mind. He'll also point to a strong end to last season as proof he still belongs among the league's best forwards, and honestly, the numbers back him up. So why hasn't a permanent transfer already been triggered? Wages. That's the blunt answer. Big salaries make even talented players harder to move because any suitor has to find room in their structure for those numbers, and that conversation takes time. His current club, for their part, appear ready to move him on for financial reasons as much as footballing ones, which only adds urgency to the situation. Word is that clubs elsewhere have shown interest too, though he's far from the only high earner on the market this summer, competing for attention alongside several other big-name attackers all looking for a fresh start. Here's the twist though, the fee and package being discussed right now will not be the same fee and package on the table in 6 weeks. Transfer valuations shift fast once deadline pressure kicks in, and by the closing days of August this could look like an entirely different deal, possibly even a straightforward loan instead of anything permanent. Stick around because that shift could happen literally overnight, and clubs that seem interested today can suddenly circle back the moment the price drops. There's also a version of this story involving Barcelona, who Rashford spent time with previously and reportedly still have admirers of his in the building. Some outlets suggest the Catalan club might be open to extending an arrangement rather than committing to a permanent transfer, largely because their own left-hand side already looks crowded after other summer business. That's the thing about this saga. Every time you think you've mapped out the most likely outcome, a new name pops up and scrambles the whole picture again. Could a familiar face in familiar surroundings end up being the simplest solution all along? It wouldn't be the wildest twist of the summer. Now switching gears, because Rashford isn't the only headline swirling around Old Trafford right now, there's growing chatter about a major move in the middle of the park, with the club reportedly eyeing a marquee midfielder to finally solve their number 6 problem. Reports out of Spain suggest a long-planned contract extension for that player has stalled, opening the door just enough for suitors to make their move. Why the sudden change of heart? Because reshuffling their own squad may require raising serious transfer funds first, and selling a marquee midfielder is one obvious way to generate that cash. It's the classic domino effect transfer windows are built on. One deal only works if another deal happens first, and right now 3 or 4 clubs are all watching each other, waiting to see who blinks. Multiple credible outlets have linked United with this move, describing it as the dream solution to their long-standing issues in the middle of the pitch, a spot that has been a revolving door of underwhelming options for what feels like years now. Whether the numbers actually line up remains to be seen, particularly with wages and fees both reportedly on the high side, and clubs rarely pay top price for a player without extracting something in return. Meanwhile, speculation continues about potential makeweights being thrown into any deal, with some reports floating the idea of a swap involving an out-of-favour attacker heading the other way as part of the package. Could 2 problems get solved with 1 transfer? It sounds tidy on paper, and executives love a deal that balances the books while filling a hole in the squad, but these things rarely play out exactly as reported once agents, release clauses, and release clause negotiations get involved. There's also been chatter about United exploring a completely different route to strengthen up front, with names being floated for a marquee striker who could arrive regardless of what happens with Rashford, adding even more layers to an already complicated summer. Who ends up walking through the door first, the midfielder or the striker, and how much of this actually depends on money moving elsewhere first? That answer alone could shape everything else that follows for the rest of this window. There's also talk of a marquee forward being lined up as a long-term replacement, someone who could eventually take over the central striking role and let the rebuild continue at pace without leaning on a player whose future already looks so uncertain. Nothing here is confirmed, and plenty of these stories will fade before August is out, the way transfer stories always do, but that's exactly why this window is worth watching closely rather than tuning out until deadline day itself. Every name floated, every swap rumour, every stalled contract, all of it feeds into a bigger picture that's still being drawn one report at a time. Think about how differently this entire saga could look depending on which domino falls first. If the midfielder arrives early, does that free up funds and squad space to finally let Rashford leave on his own terms? If Milan can't agree personal terms, does Dortmund suddenly become the frontrunner overnight? And if Barcelona reopen the door, does every other suitor simply walk away rather than compete? None of these threads exist in isolation anymore, and that's what makes this window genuinely unpredictable compared to recent summers. One thing seems fairly certain though, whatever happens, Rashford is unlikely to still be wearing his current club's shirt come the opening weekend of the new season. The question now is simply where he ends up, under what kind of deal, and whether it actually works out for him this time. Milan feels like the emotional favourite given how well that pathway has worked for others recently, but favourites don't always win in this business, and transfer windows love nothing more than proving pundits wrong at the last possible moment. Dortmund still lingers as a quiet second option, Barcelona hasn't fully closed the door, and even Juventus can't be ruled out completely until United's own plans in attack become clearer over the coming weeks. Which of these stories do you think actually happens before deadline day, and which one is just noise designed to keep the rumour? Mill spinning! Drop your prediction in the comments below, tell me exactly who you think Rashford plays for next season, and let me know if you buy into the midfield swap theory too, because I genuinely think it's more likely than people realise right now. Smash that like button if you want more transfer breakdowns like this one delivered the moment the news actually breaks, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the update the second this deal finally moves. I'll genuinely see you in the very next video.